Okay. So we are live now. So let me just go pick up my. Yesterday, we stopped at 3.38, but we did not go through the details of that particular verse. It's a very interesting verse. So we'll spend some time today. There are only, I think, 5 verses left for this chapter, in this chapter. So we'll try and read all of Prabhupada's purports. Okay. Okay. So, does anyone want to recall any of the points we discussed yesterday? Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna, Mataji, something can I just try?
Yes, Mataji. Yes, Mataji.
Yeah. In the last class, you were emphasizing on the lust, and you said that that is a form of desire because it starts with the thoughts, and you get attached with the. That leads to all actions. So, like you were telling the example of the forest fire, how exactly it wanders around and how it starts engulfing it. So, same way, like when the amount of lust increases, the intellectual goes to the sleep. In the sleep mode.
Yes.
And that is a time when but the mind will be much alive. That too much of likes and dislikes starts engulfing the persons. Yeah. And that leads to degradations.
Very nice.
So that is why we say that we have to, we have to surrender to Lord with our work so that we'll be away from all these things. Yeah.
Very nice, Mataji. Hare Krishna.
So like a good student, I've made some points.
Thank you so much,
so that,
Mataji.
I can explain because last day I was feeling so embarrassed that I could not answer anything. So
okay, Mataji. It happens to all of us, so don't worry about it.
Hare Krishna, Mataji.
Hare Krishna. Thank you so much. Anyone else wants to add on? Hare Krishna. What was the question that Arjuna asked the Lord? You remember that? Just go back to your book. So Arjuna asks, O descendant of Vrishni, by what is one impelled to sinful acts? Even unwillingly, as if engaged by force. So remember, we discussed this. We all know the good and bad. Yeah, in every society, in every kind of a situation, we know what is good, what is not so good, or not good at all. Yet, we engage in acts, and sometimes we kind of regret about it, which is a good thing. But many times, once a person is so habituated to doing it all the time, they have no remorse at all. There's no remorse, which is what we see in several of the high profile kind of, acts of violence, and as well as any kind of misappropriation that happens, not just in India, across the world. Seldom people say I've done the mistake. Seldom. They always think what they have done is right. In fact, today I was at there's a literature festival that is happening here in Bangalore. And there was one author. He's a very well-known author, an upcoming author. He's an engineer turned lawyer, and he's doing very well for himself. So I believe a book of his has come.
Mataji, is it Sai Deepak?
Yeah, exactly.
Okay.
Sai Deepak, yeah. So a book of his, he was supposed to talk about his book, but he didn't talk about his book. But there's one thing that he said, which kind of caught my attention, where he said that, look, the people who are good, when you want to do something good, or when you are goodness, when you are you are someone who always wants to be on the right side, such people will have to follow rules and regulations. Whereas for those who don't have to really, bother about, or who are used to doing mistakes, they don't follow any rules and regulations until they are caught. Until they are not caught, not very often everyone is caught, right? Some people get caught when things become, just out of control. They get caught. But otherwise, he says, until they get caught, they are good only. Whereas for a person who always wants to be on the right side and who always thinks, one needs to be honest and, straightforward, they are the ones who follow all the rules and regulations. But that made me think a bit. He had a point, maybe. And maybe before I kind of, took shelter of the Bhagavad Gita, I would have thought that as a gospel truth. Actually speaking, when one is a devotee, when one has, subsumed the path of bhakti, subsumed to the bhakti marga, actually it's very simple. They don't ever, want to do anything that is wrong because they're always thinking of Krishna. They will never do anything wrong. Even if they do, I told you, remember in the verses we read yesterday, they kind of do a prayaschitta. Because they're constantly doing a reflection. They're constantly doing that, they're kind of working out their behavior and the events that have probably transpired during the day, during the week, during the month, or over the years. What is it that really makes them feel good? And what are the things where they know that they haven't done well? Because they're honest. They are honest, not because they're making an effort. It automatically comes because you're surrendering to Krishna. That is the power of devotion. That is the power of bhakti. No other kind of marga, no other kind of path gives you that level of, awakening to the consciousness. Everybody talks about consciousness, but that real awakening and having that focus happens only when there is bhakti. Because bhakti is like a, there's so much of purity in bhakti. There is so much of selflessness in bhakti because you're looking up to someone else. It is an invisible, strong connect that you are building with that super soul. And that super soul never fails you. All kinds of relationships will fail us. Whether it be our family, whether it be our friends, whether it be our colleagues. At some point in time, you'll feel, oh, the support is not enough. Why am I not getting? There is a certain expectation you have and that doesn't come back. Whereas in bhakti, the expectation between the bhakta and the Lord is sublime, is blissful. The bhakta never complains. The bhakta never complains. The bhakta never says, why me? He says, oh Lord, I'm sure there is a purpose behind everything that is happening to me. Whereas in every other kind, when there is lack of bhakti, or when there is no belief in bhakti, many people say, oh no, I'm an atheist. Oh, fine, that's their lookout. It's fine. We're not being judgmental about anybody. But when there is lack of it, it is definitely something that doesn't give you that kind of power. It doesn't give you that energy. Bhakti is energy. Sudama, look at the example of Sudama in our scriptures. He was like completely, he was sucked into poverty. But his bhakti was so strong, he never complained to the Lord. Krishna was his close friend. They studied together in the Gurukula. They were the best of pals. He never complained. It was only when his wife prodded him and said, please go visit Dwarakanath. Please go visit him. I am sure your friend will understand. Yet, when he went there, he never asked Krishna, Krishna, give me this. I have come here because my wife sent me, because my children have no food. Now you may ask, why is it Krishna automatically didn't give anything to Sudama? That's another question. Lord knows that we have a lot of problems. Why because he has given us the independence. He's given you all the independence, and because he believes that you can solve your problems. Because he gives us that buddhi, he gives us that intellect to solve our problems. He believes that you can do it maybe. But he never lets you down. Even when you have all the problems, you will definitely face them with all the power. The power comes from him, from the Yogeshwara. He gives it to you. Now, before I jump into today's verse 3.38, I want to share an anecdote of His Holiness Radhanath Swami. All of you can Google him. His YouTubes are available. In fact, when you listen to him, there are shots of his also available. 3 minutes, 5 minutes. YouTube videos are available. Please listen to him whenever you're probably driving in your car or something. Just put it on. It is so nice. His voice is so soothing. And at least, when I kind of listen to his voice, I think, oh my God, I bray actually. Such a soothing voice he has. When you listen to him only, you will fall in, you will soak yourself in bhakti. It is so nice. So Radhanath Goswami was a 19-year-old boy in Chicago. He was living with his parents. And he kind of, I think when he was 19, he suddenly had the desire to search for truth. And he left home and he kind of went to very many places, all kinds of places, monasteries. He visited a lot of people on the spirituality, on the path of spirituality. And finally, he came to India. And this is where he met Srila Prabhupada. And then he got completely convinced with the great scriptures that we have and all that Prabhupada was doing, and also the association with Prabhupada itself. The association with Prabhupada, in fact, when you listen to some of his disciples, they are still there. Some of them are available. And I think we should be fortunate to listen to some of the live sessions that they do. It is so, you get enamored, but you also kind of, when you hear multiple people talking about one person, the consistency of that person is what comes out. Prabhupada was, people, in fact, they say that very many of his students or his disciples joined the movement not because they had completely read Bhagavad Gita and had understood everything and they were convinced of everything. No, it was because of Prabhupada. The simplicity, the man, the humility, his honesty, his kindness, his compassion. Remember, I gave you the story of Crazy Peter. The level of empathy that he had for every Jivatmas. That is what moved people, or that is what attracted people to the Krishna consciousness. They said, oh my God, this is the power of Krishna consciousness. Okay. So Radhanath Swamiji, he then became, he took Diksha from Prabhupada, and later he took sannyas, because I think after Prabhupada passed away, he took sannyas. And then now he is he's an activist. Activist for what? Activist to help people to embrace bhakti. And he's also someone who's a great speaker, and he helps a whole lot of people to kind of find the truth within themselves. So it seems he once, when he was giving a lecture, I think I don't know if she's still a minister, Maneka Gandhi was there. I think she was the minister then for environment. She told him, after Radhanath Swamiji's lecture was over, he said, "Yaar, you all speak about Hare Krishna all the time and Japa all the time. There is so much of pollution outside. Look at there's a pollution, air pollution, there's noise pollution, there's water pollution. So much of pollution. Huh? How does Hare Krishna help kind of, solve these pollution problems? Because she was a minister for environment those days. So much of pollution everywhere. So Swamiji just heard her. And then he said, Madam, Krishna consciousness, the Bhakti Marga, is something helps cleansing you from the inside. He said, only when you are cleansed from inside, you will also cleanse things around you which are outside of you. When there is no cleanliness within you, the expectation to have a clean environment outside never comes. And this is so true. And she understood. So immediately she conceded. So he said, let me clean the inside of the people and you continue cleaning the external. And she was convinced. And it's so true. Look at us, we all have fabulous homes. We keep our homes clean, spick and span. We want the best of infrastructure around us. We want lovely, nice curtains. We want nice sofa sets. We want our, all our machinery to work well. We engage help to kind of get every nook and corner of our home clean. We have the best of best washing machines to clean our clothes because we want to really think, and then we engage sometimes people to iron our clothes, or we give it to dry cleaners, or sometimes we do it ourselves because we want everything perfect. And we are looking for the best of shampoo, the best of soaps, best of everything which kind of cleanses our body. But when it comes to kind of, keeping the external outside, we don't care about throwing anything and everything outside because it's not our home. You say, my house is clean. I don't care about outside. So that's the mentality. Why? Because there's that consciousness of caring for things around. Remember the wheel of the Dharma Chakra, the wheel of action. The wheel of action is all about how we cooperate with everything, nature and our surroundings, and with everything that is endowed in the nature, and with everybody who contributes to the upkeep of nature. Today, it is so simple. Our scriptures are very well said. It is in cooperation and showing solidarity is where we win. And today, we have things like COP and all that stuff. COP is called, I think, Conference of what? Conference of Parties or Confederation of Parties or something, right? Yeah, Conference of Parties. These are climate. There's a climate change, conference that happens every year. Everybody meets in a location and they all make promise. Okay, I will reduce carbon footprint to this extent. I will do this. I will do that. It is not needed. If we really look at our scriptures and if we follow it, nothing of that is actually needed. Such expensive conferences needn't have to be there. But we have forgotten our roots. We have forgotten the fundamentals that our scriptures have always been telling us. It is so well, documented, and people lived such a life. Today we have forgotten all that. So coming back to Radhanath Goswamiji, his simplicity. You must listen at least to a couple of his YouTube videos. Simplicity, honesty, that love and kindness that he shows is so evident. So therefore, these are elevated devotees, right? And we are still neophytes. At least I am still a neophyte. I won't include the rest of you. I am still a neophyte. I have a long way to go. Today, in fact, I made a mistake. As I was coming out of the literary event, there were a lot of our ISKCON young devotees, selling, Gita Jayanti is happening. It was there yesterday, but this whole month you will find all our ISKCON devotees, selling books. And one young boy approached me. He had a whole lot of books. And I looked at his book. I have all those books. I said, I have all these books. And then I came out and got into the taxi. And then I came home. I told my mother, I said, oh, Ma, how many young boys were there selling books? And my mother said, did you buy a book? I said, no. I said, and she told me, how could you do that? Why did you do that? How could you not picked up a book? I said, no, I had all the books. That's not the point. Yeah. So I think I'm just sharing this with you because I made that mistake and I'm feeling terrible. I'm feeling miserable, actually speaking, that about what I did. I'm ashamed of myself. So this whole month, ISKCON devotees will be, you'll see them in almost every corner, in every, every major junctions and roads selling books. So if you do see them, please pick up a book, even if you have the book. Don't do what I did. So therefore, as a devotee, we have a higher responsibility than the rest of them. It's not that you need to follow rules. It's not that you follow. It automatically comes, And that is what I said. When you are truly trying to get onto the platform of bhakti, you will think about all your actions. And that is what helps you to make progress. Okay. Hare Krishna. So I will share the screen and let's get to our lesson today.
Mataji, sorry to disturb.
Yeah.
That Goswami's name is Radhanath, or how is it? Because when I searched,
His Holiness Radhanath Swamiji.
R-A-D-H-A.
R-A-D-H-A, Radhanath, yes.
Okay. Because when I searched, I got Ramnath, so that is
Radhanath Swamiji, yeah.
Okay.
And then there's another one. If you really want to know the qualities of a devotee, you must listen to this. There's a video of His Holiness Swayam Bhagavan Keshav Prabhu. Swayam Bhagavan Keshav Prabhu Maharaj, I think. Yeah. Please, he recently, last week, he gave a lecture in Dwaraka, I think. Dwaraka. It's beautiful. He talks about the inner qualities of a devotee. It's just beautiful. Listen to him. I mean, I can tell you what he said, but I don't think I'll be as effective, and I'll not do justice to the way he speaks. So it's better that you listen to what he says. Absolutely a fabulous Prabhuji. He is a Gujarati, but born and brought up in the UK. And then at the age of 21, he took to the Krishna conscious movement, and he's a sannyasi now. Absolutely a fabulous Prabhuji. You will just love listening to him. Okay. So today we start with verse 3.38. Anyone, any questions up until now? No questions? Okay. So 3.38, this verse is, Dhum me na vriyate vahinir yatha darsho male nacha yatol be na vrato garbas tatha tenedam avratam. Means, as fire is covered by smoke, as a mirror is covered by dust, or as the embryo is covered by the womb, similarly, the living entity is covered by different degrees of this lust. Lust is desire. There are innumerable number of desires that we all carry, not just one, not just two, innumerable numbers. It could be for books, it could be for clothes, it could be for wealth, it could be for fame, it could be for recognition, it could be for indulgence of physical pleasures. It can be innumerable number for food, whatever, but that's a desire. Anything which is above a certain limit is excessive, and that is what this verse is all about. Here, this is an example, as all of you know, Bhagavad Gita. Well, the Lord explains a certain concept. He also gives you an example. So like that, every chapter you'll have 2-3 examples. In this chapter, he gave the example of agriculture. Remember that Dharma Chakra, when we were discussing, there was an example of that in the form of the example was that of, from agriculture, right? talked about grains and how, how someone doing their duties in turn, it leads to rains, and how rains lead to more prosperity, and then more prosperity leads to a good harvest. A good harvest leads to us kind of enjoying the products. And then, ultimately he says, if you don't kind of give back, if you don't kind of acknowledge all that you have received, he says, you're a thief. That was an example. So here he is giving another example. So this example is about how there are three types. He kind of distinguishes between the level of desire, the intensity of the density of the desire, or the intensity of a desire that we all carry within ourselves. Can anyone guess what, or not guess, can anyone interpret this verse? I mean, if you've already read the verse, you're purport, it's fine. So you can explain, or can you just guess how a desire, like a fire covered by smoke over fire, dust on the mirror, and the embryo or the fetus in the womb, how would this translate to the understanding of desire? Hare Krishna. Anybody?
Could it also mean that it's a little obscure?
No. No. Anyone else? So, our desires are like a parda, a curtain, a veil, right? Sometimes the curtain or the veil or the covering may just be like a smoke. So when there is a smoke over fire, it kind of prevents you from seeing the fire, or it prevents you from getting the best out of the fire, either by way of light or heat or the energy of the fire. So similarly, when there is that kind of a desire, it prevents us from getting the best, or prevents us from making the best use of an opportunity. It prevents us from seeing the real. This curtain is unreal. This unreal, in the form of desire, prevents you from progressing or seeing things as they are. But smoke over fire is still a desire that can be overcome, because a small whiff of a wind comes, it just goes away. So it's easy to overcome. And then if you take the next example, dust on the mirror, is a still more, when you've kind of, you go away on a long journey or something, you have if you have mirrors around your house, when I say, any kind of mirrors, or maybe your window mirror or the mirror that you look into, or dust collects. Maybe after 2-3 levels of cleaning, it becomes okay. So some desires, with a little bit of endeavor, with a little bit of effort, can be overcome. The third type, I'm sure you're guessing what I'm going to say now. The third type is the worst one, because it is like, the fetus in an embryo just stays in the same position, and it can't come out. It's fixed. Only at a certain point in time, after a certain designated time, is when it comes out. The fetus comes out as a baby. So that is the worst form of desire. When desires are so much, you accumulate so much of desire, it kind of precipitates you and becomes a burden on you. And this is a very hopeless situation. In fact, Prabhupada in the purport says that this kind of a situation is one that you can relate with trees, because trees and all can't move. They are stationed in a place. Even if they want to kind of get away from, the pollution that we create for it, or the kind of atrocities that we do on our nature, it can't do anything about it because it's stuck. Some desires are so heavy on you that it doesn't let you kind of completely free yourself, or doesn't let you, get on to tasting the higher levels or the higher potentials of your or the higher potential of what you that you have. It prevents you. It kind of completely, just it becomes, it's like a hard chain around you. It's like a chain around you, and it's really, really difficult for you to break the chain. The other one, he says, the dust on the mirror is like animals. They stay in a position, they stay in some place for some time, and then they just, given an opportunity, they just run away. So some things can be easily overcome. They're like animals, he says. The third one, he says, is a human. And why does he compare the humans with smoke over fire? Because he says the human has an ability to make choices. They are the only ones who have the intellect. So therefore, it is said in the Bhagavatam that the Lord expects a lot from a human form, from a human entity, because they can make choices. And hence, we have to ensure that we don't break that expectation of the Lord. Whereas we get caught up in our own desires and set our own expectations, and we get ourselves sucked in and get ourselves, entangled with this material form and the material things around us, which are temporary. We are living, as I said, we are living in a hotel. This world is a hotel. This body that we have is a rented space. Our ultimate space and the platform that we have to look for is that of the abode of the Lord. That is our eternal hope. So now let's read the purport of Prabhupada.
Mataji, one doubt here. From this one, what I felt is that, see, the severity aspects of this lust.
Yes.
See, dust covered on the mirror. See, that is, as you said, it can be cleaned easily. But when you talk about the smoke, it is little more intense. And when you talk about the embryo, that is still more difficult. So that order, it would have been there, no?
No, dust, the smoke, Mataji, is like just a small wind comes, the smoke goes away, no? There's a smoke.
Oh, in that way. I was thinking about, you have seen smoke in the TV, you have seen, sometimes some building caught fire, and this amount of smoke is so difficult for them to control it. No, that one, was that in my mind. Okay. The one which you said, it is okay. Yeah.
And another thing is, it's like, let me give you another example. I often give this example, in the youth batches. It's easy because the youth relate to it. I'm sure all of us will relate to it. Suppose some habits, see, at the end of the day, it is our thoughts, which is our desire, which leads to thoughts, and thoughts in turn lead to actions. Sorry, the other way. The desire lead to thoughts, and thoughts lead to action. And repeated action is what becomes a habit. So think of someone who's used to getting up in the afternoon, 12 o'clock. If such a person has to get up at 5 o'clock in the morning, it is super tough for them. They will really find it, they will really struggle to do it. Right? But on the other hand, if it's someone who's waking up at 6 o'clock, waking up at 5 is not going to be difficult. So that's like smoke over fire. And for someone who's getting up at 7 o'clock or 8 o'clock, it's not so, maybe for a few days they'll struggle with a little bit of a habit, or creating some kind of a system. They will kind of slowly be able to overcome that kind of a disability that they have. But someone who's used to getting up at 3, 4, 5, go to sleep anytime. Yeah, there are very many people, they take pride in saying, oh, I am nocturnal. I kind of, I work in the night. Of course, I'm not including the call center, professionals, but that is, they do it because they need to do it. That's their job, and they do it. But very many people, as students, we must have seen that. They take pride and say, oh, you know what? I studied through the night and I'm sleeping through the day. Right? For such people, it's very difficult to kind of get into the habit of that early morning waking up. So these are habits. So it's nothing. Some habits are hard to kind of overcome, and some habits are easy to overcome. So therefore, in fact, the whole coaching industry or the counseling industry relies on this, habits. It's not that habits can't be changed. Habits can be changed with some conscious effort. We can definitely change those habits. It's just that to what degree are those habits, stuck to us. So similarly, our desires are also like that. To what extent are we, for example, look at Dhritarashtra. Let's take the example. Let's go back to Dhritarashtra. Dhritarashtra, he had the golden opportunity to call off this war even after the armies assembled in the battlefield of Kurukshetra. He knew fully well who Lord Krishna was. He had heard about all the pastimes of the Lord while he was a child. And the Lord also made every effort to kind of see how this war could be averted. He said, give the Pandavas just 5 villages. And even now, just as you and I, we are reading the Bhagavad Gita, Sanjaya was narrating all that was happening on the battlefield to Dhritarashtra. In fact, in the later chapters, chapter 13, chapter 10 onwards, there's so much of opulences. We'll read about the opulences of Lord Krishna. In fact, Lord Krishna himself says who he is. And then in chapter 13, he kind of reveals his Vishwarupam. Sanjaya explains to that, this is the Lord. Everything is contained within him. But still, Dhritarashtra doesn't change because he had such a strong desire for his own, and he wanted to usurp everything for himself and his sons, or his attachment to the Rashtra. His name itself is Dhritarashtra. His attachment to the Rashtra or the kingdom, and the affection adulation and the affection that he had for his children was so strong that he didn't want to kind of even look beyond. He didn't want to just, kind of come out of his the foolishness that was covering him. So like that, Dhritarashtra is an example. But we also carry such attachments. We also carry a lot of, as I said, all of us, at least I know I still am carrying a lot of desires. So each of us can probably, look into ourselves and figure out how much of it we are carrying on ourselves. And then we say we are stressed. And then we say we are depressed. Then we say we are, God is unfair to us. Right? So shall we read this purport? Anybody can someone volunteer? Hare Krishna. Anybody?
Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna, Kedar Prabhu, is it? Who's this? Prabhuji?
Hare Krishna.
Yes, Prabhuji. Please read, Prabhuji.
Yeah. So there are 3 degrees of covering of the living entity by which his pure consciousness is obscured. This covering is but lust under different manifestations like smoke in the fire, dust on the mirror, and the womb about the embryo. When lust is compared to smoke, it is understood that the fire of the living spark can be a little perceived. In other words, when the living entity exhibits his Krishna consciousness slightly, he may be likened to the fire covered by smoke. Although fire is necessary when there is smoke, there is no overt manifestation of fire in the early stage. This stage is like the beginning of Krishna consciousness. The dust on the mirror refers to a cleansing process of the mirror of the mind by so many spiritual methods. The best process is to chant the holy names of the Lord. The embryo covered by the womb is an analogy illustrating a helpless position for the child in the womb. Is so helpless that he cannot even move. This stage of living condition can be compared to that of the trees. The trees are also living entities, but they have been put in such a condition of life by such a great exhibition of lust that they are almost void of all consciousness. The covered mirror is compared to the birds and the beasts, and the smoke-covered fire is compared to the human being. In the form of a human being, the living entity may revive a little Krishna consciousness, and if he makes further development, the fire of spiritual life can be kindled in the human form of life. By careful handling of the smoke in the fire can be made to blaze. Therefore, the human form of life is a chance for the living entity to escape the entanglement of material existence. In the human form of life, one can conquer the enemy, lust, by cultivation of Krishna consciousness under able guidance. Hare
Hare
Krishna.
Krishna. Hare Krishna. So, Bindu Mataji, you used the word obscurity. Did you mean this? Hare Krishna. I thought I heard you use the word obscurity. Hare Krishna. She's not there.
Yeah, I'm there. I'm sorry, I was on mute.
Okay, okay. Is this what you meant?
Yeah.
Okay. So you're bang on. Sorry. Okay. I should have asked you what you meant. Okay, sorry. So therefore, so what Prabhupada is saying here is that the fire and the smoke, he compares it to anyone who has embarked on the journey of Krishna consciousness. Even a little bit. Swalpamapi apsi dadmasya. Even a little bit. And then he says it's an early manifestation, initial form. So I think most of you who are devotees here, probably we are in this stage. Or we are also probably in the second stage as well, where we need a lot of guidance, where we need a lot of support. That is the spiritual method. One is reading, engaging in activities with in devotee association. All that is something that is compared to dust on the mirror. The third one is a hopeless position, is what Prabhupada says. But remember, there are very many people who have been in this hopeless position and have actually, conquered that as well. So we need the mercy of the Lord. That's what in Bhagavatam, it says that you need the mercy of the Lord for us to be able to overcome all our shortcomings. If the mercy of the Lord is there, then even if you are, in the position of a embryo in the womb, you can definitely overcome. There have been very, very many examples within the ISKCON world of people who were completely drug addicts, who were big criminals, who are now, absolutely purified and are really, great examples of what Krishna consciousness or the ability to kind of understand and engage in Krishna consciousness can really do to us, and kind of getting that higher level of bliss, which is actually something that we can easily achieve because the soul that we carry is of and from the Supreme Lord. So it is not at all difficult if one, attempts to doing it. It is all depends on your determination, on your dridata. If there is the determination, if there is faith without envy and there is determination, it is definitely possible for anybody. Okay, so we'll go back to our slide. Okay. So is my slide visible?
Yes, Mataji.
Okay. So here, Rajpriya Mataji, can you read this? This is just again a recap of the purport. Hare Krishna.
Yes, Mataji. There are 3 degrees of covering obscure pure consciousness of the living entity. This covering is but lust under different manifestations like smoke in the fire, dust on the mirror, and the web about the embryo. Lust is compared to smoke. It is understood that the fire of the living spark can be a little perceived. In other words, when the living entity exhibits his Krishna consciousness slightly, he may be likened to the fire covered by smoke. Although fire is necessary, where there is smoke, there is no overt manifestation of fire in the early stage. The stage is like the beginning of Krishna consciousness. The dust on the mirror refers to a cleansing process of the mirror of the mind by so many spiritual methods. The best process is to chant the holy name of the Lord. Hare Krishna, Mataji.
Yeah. Can you read? Continue reading.
Yes, Mataji. The embryo covered by the verb is an analogy illustrating a helpless position for the child in the verb is so helpless that he cannot even move. The stage of living condition can be compared to that of the trees. The trees are also living entities, but they have been put in such a condition of life by such a great exhibition of lust that they are almost void of all consciousness. The covered mirror is compared to the birds and beasts, and the smoke covered fire is compared to the human beings. In the form of a human being, the living entity may receive a little Krishna consciousness, and if it makes further development, the fire of spiritual life can be kindled in the human form of life. By careful handling of the smoke in the fire, fire can be made to blaze. Therefore, the human form of life is a chance for the living entity to escape the entanglement of material existence. In the human form of life, one can conquer the enemy lust by cultivation of Krishna consciousness under able guidance.
Hare Krishna. This is almost the perfect. I think it's almost the perfect. Okay. Now, this is text 38. So, degrees of lust. We have seen this. So, we'll just move forward. Okay. 39. Okay. Avritam jnanam etena jnanino nitya vairina kama rupena kauntena dushpura pure nana lenacha. It is said in the Manusmriti. This is from the purport. It is said in the Manusmriti that lust cannot be satisfied by any amount of sense enjoyment, just as fire is never extinguished by a constant supply. So lust or desire is so powerful that it keeps growing when it suppose something that you desire, it gets fulfilled. You want more of it. Today you have a car, you have a car, say a Hyundai normal car. Tomorrow you want a BMW. And once you get a BMW, you want something more than that. So it goes on and goes on and that. So 3.39, the translation is, thus the wise living entity's pure consciousness becomes covered by his eternal enemy in the form of lust. So the desires are our enemy. Adhyatma, remember the three miseries of every living entity. One is Adhyatmika, Adi Bhautika, and then Adi Daiva. Adhyatmika is what you kind of create for yourself. The miseries that you create for yourself. What is that misery? Our own desires causes our own miseries. They are like cancer. It just spreads like anything. No amount of chemotherapy will support it. Some cancers are, cured by chemotherapy, but lust or desire never ever gets cured unless one makes that conscious effort to kind of really see through it and ensure that they work on it so that they come out clean. And that is only possible when there is something to hold on. See, when you want to kind of come out of something which is not good, you need something, you have to replace it with something else. That's why we always say, whenever there are habits that you are unable to overcome, look at things that can probably help you to kind of forget it or ensure that you can really look at things that will make you that will make you, happier than the habit that you're trying to come out of. Very many times you'll see people taking on to certain hobbies, and in fact take to hobbies that are really, soothing and that which helps you to kind of, that which helps you to kind of feel happier, and that which helps you to kind of, progress. There is something more in that, or there is something for you that engages you so much that it kind of starts growing into you. So In order to come out of something, you need to get something else. So take to classical music, take to classical dancing, or take to some form which is far more enriching, far more healthy. So look for healthier options so that you get out of those things which are unhealthy, which are non-value adding. So he says, the living entities, a man's pure consciousness is covered by his eternal enemy in the form of lust, which is never satisfied and which burns like fire. So this is a beautiful purport, actually. I think we should read. We should spend time reading that purport. Let me go to the... Let's read that purport. 3.39. Can somebody volunteer, please? 3.39. It's a short purport. Can somebody read this?
May I, Mataji?
Yeah, yes, Mother. Yes, Mother.
Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna.
It is said that in the Manu Smriti that the lust cannot be satisfied by any amount of sense enjoyment, just as fire is never extinguished by a constant supply of fuel. In the material world, the center of all activities is sex, and thus this material world is called Maitunya Agara, or the shackles of sex life. In the ordinary prison house, the criminals are kept within bars. Similarly, the criminals who are disobedient to the law of the Lord are shackled by sex life. The advancement of the material civilization on the basis of sense gratifications means increasing the duration of the material existence of the living entity. Therefore, this lust is the symbol of ignorance by which the living entity is kept within the material world. While one enjoys sense gratifications, it may be that there is some feeling of happiness but actually that so-called feeling of happiness is the ultimate enemy of the sense enjoyer. Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna. So lust is actually both rajasic, and when carried too far, it is also ignorance. Yeah. So let's go back to our... One second. Let me just get back. Thank you, Mataji, for that. Okay. So we'll move forward. 3.40. Indriyani mano buddhir ashyadishtathanam uchyate etair vimo hayati esha jnanam avritya dehina. The senses. Now he's going to talk about which are the places where lust can probably come from. The senses, the mind, and the intelligence are the sitting places of this lust. Through them, lust covers the real knowledge of the living entity and bewilder. What is the real knowledge? Hare Krishna. What is the real knowledge of the living entity?
Knowing Lord Krishna.
Yeah, knowing that you are an eternal soul.
Yeah. Knowing
that you are a soul, and knowing that you're going to continuously, get into this vicious circle of Janma Mrityu. That is the real knowledge. So therefore, lust actually, prevents us from knowing that, because we think we are eternal. If you remember in level 1, you all must have seen an example of how, the Pandavas once, when they were in the forest, when they were hunting for some water, each one of them, Arjuna, climbs on top and sees there's a water body, and Nakula Sahadev, they go, and then they never come back. And then when Bhishma goes, when Bhima goes, he finds his brothers, dead. And the person who's the owner of that pond, he says, no, you have to first answer my question, only then I'll allow you to take a pitcher of water. He says, no, who are you? He says, I am, Bhima. I can do whatever. I'll do whatever I want. I'm a prince. And he also dies. And then Arjuna goes. Arjuna also falls down, because Arjuna also doesn't listen to, or doesn't kind of, engage in a conversation with that person, or doesn't really, is respectful. He's not respectful to the person who's asking him this question. Ultimately, Yudhishthir goes, and then he asks, he falls on his, he gets down to his knees and says, who are you? That all that I want is, please, give me the life back of my brothers. In fact, he asked for the life of his 2 younger brothers, Nakula Sahadev. He said, give me back their lives. Okay. So the moral is, Everyone knows that life is short. Everyone knows that one day all of us have to leave this this body, this physical body and this physical world. And yet we engage in activity as if we are eternal. Right? So here is an example of a chariot. A body is like a chariot. The senses are compared to the horses. If let loose, they will go to all directions. Because what do the senses do? The senses are constantly wanting something. They say, oh, I like it. And then what the mind does? Oh, yeah, fine, let's get it. And what does the intelligence do? Oh, okay, fine, I'll find out a way in which I can, by which we can get them. So therefore, the senses are, the senses always need to be controlled. The mind, therefore, needs to be strong. The mind is the place which is constantly, looking at, it's like a post office. The mind just can only do that, like, dislike. Yes, I want it, I don't want it. Whereas the intelligence is the one which can distinguish, discriminate, make the right judgment. It can really look at the pros and cons based on the experiences, based on its own past experience and also the experience of others. It can make a rational decision. So it's a rational thinking spot. It's a capital of any living entity. Whereas if that capital is completely contaminated, then the mind will go haywire. The mind will keep sending things to the intellect, then the intellect is not working. It's just kind of thing. And the soul actually is a pure form. And the soul completely gets covered by the intelligence, mind, and senses. So therefore, we need to guard the soul. The soul is pure. We need to guard our soul so that the soul does not lose or does not get contaminated. It is pure. So the impurities are transferred to the soul from the senses, the mind, and the intelligence. Okay. So let's read the purport of this verse. It's also a very nice purport Prabhupada has given us. So let's look at that. 1 minute. 1 minute. Let's look at 3.40. Yeah, can someone volunteer to read this purport? It's a short, okay, it is, okay. Can someone read this purport? Hare Krishna. Hare Krishna. Can someone read?
Hare Krishna Mataji.
Yes, Prabhuji.
I can, yeah. The enemy has captured different strategic positions in the body of the conditioned soul, and therefore Lord Krishna is giving hints of those places, so that one who wants to conquer the enemy may know where he can be found. Mind is the center of all the activities of the sense, and thus the mind is the reservoir of all ideas of sense gratification, and as a result, the mind and the senses become the repositories of lust. Next, the intelligence department becomes the capital of such lustful propensities. Intelligence is the immediate next door neighbor, the spirit soul. Lusty intelligence influences the spirit soul to acquire the false ego and the identity itself with matter, and thus with the mind and the senses. The spirit soul becomes addicted to enjoying the material senses and mistakes that are this as true happens.
Yeah.
This false identification of the spirit soul is very nicely explained in the Srimad Bhagavatam.
Yeah. So this is the translation of what is there in the Srimad Bhagavatam.
Yeah. So a human being who identifies this body made of 3 elements within his self, who considers the byproducts of the body to be his kinsmen, who considers the land of birth as worshipable, and who goes to the place of pilgrimage simply to take a bath rather than meet men of transcendental knowledge, there is to be considered as an ass or a cow.
Yeah. Hare Krishna. So what this means is that, we just can't, the Bhagavad Gita is to be lived. If the Bhagavad Gita or the knowledge of the scriptures is just used as another knowledge seeking, process, or another, just another book. And if you don't really, take the essence of it and practice that essence, then it becomes meaningless. There are very many people who kind of, do certain things just for the sake of doing it. Okay, I go to a temple because everybody goes to the temple. I go to a temple because, okay, fine, it is something that we have already done, that we always do in our family. It is something that I am made to do, and therefore I'm doing it. I really don't know why I'm doing what I'm doing. If you really don't know what you're doing, and if you really don't understand the purpose behind it, then it actually, it's just clear, it's sheer ignorance. Yeah. So Bhagavad Gita actually adds value only when we start experiencing the knowledge by putting it into practice. If you don't put it to practice, then you will not be able to experience that bliss that comes out of this great philosophy that the Lord has shared with us through Arjuna. Okay. We'll just skip all this. Okay. I'm skipping some of this. I'll anyway be sharing this deck with you all, but those are basically a summary of what we have already seen, and because we are reading the purport. Okay. So 3.341 Tasmat Tvam Indriyani Adhav Niyama Bharatar Sabha Papamanam Prajahi Hi Enam Jnana Vijnana Nashanam. Therefore, O Arjuna, best of the Bharatas, he calls him the best of the Bharatas. He's someone who's highly accomplished. O Arjuna, best of the Bharatas, in the very beginning, curb this great symbol of sin, lust, by regulating the senses, and slay this destroyer of knowledge and self-realization. So, it's a very long purport. But actually, the last paragraph of the purport, has anyone read all these verses before coming into the class? Hare Krishna? Anyone? No, right? Somebody did it? No?
Yes, I did.
You did?
Kedar here.
Yes, Kedar. Hare Krishna, Prabhu.
Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna. This is again the last verse of this one is very nice. So Kedar Prabhu, would you like to read?
Yes, please.
Is it visible?
Yes, it's visible.
Yeah.
Lust is the only perverted reflection of the love of God, which is natural for every living entity. But if one is educated in Krishna consciousness from the very beginning, that natural love of God cannot deteriorate into lust. When love of God deteriorates into lust, it is very difficult to return to the normal condition. Nonetheless, Krishna consciousness is so powerful that even a late beginner can become a lover of God by following the regulative principles of devotional service. So, from any stage of life or from the time of understanding its urgency, one can begin regulating the sense in Krishna consciousness, devotional service of the Lord, and turn the lust into love of Godhead, the highest perfectional stage of the human life.
Absolutely. Hare Krishna. Hare Krishna. So, lust is a perverted reflection of the spiritual kingdom is all about love. And as I said yesterday, our faith talks about the love for God, love of God and love for God. It's not fear of God. There's no need for us to be fearful or scared of that supreme consciousness. God realization is a blissful process. God realization is that wonderful process where you are completely kind of giving away things that are unnatural to the soul. The soul is the pure form. The soul is part and parcel of the supreme consciousness. So where is the question of the soul being anything different from what that supreme consciousness is all about? That's what the Shankaracharya always said. It's a Brahman. He said, once we kind of give away this body, we also become Brahman. But no, it's not as simple as that. You need to work to ensure that you kind of get that purity of that Brahman. Only when you're able to get that purity of the Brahman, will you really be able to kind of become part and parcel of the Brahman. Otherwise, we continue in this cycle of Janma Mrityu. So that's why the lust is a perverted reflection of that spiritual form, because the desires are more of the material, is more towards a material gratification. When once we kind of cover ourselves with the needs of our own desires, we lose that purity. But there is a way to redeem that purity. How will that? That is by developing that love for God. And once you develop that love for God, automatically your engagements, which are not part of that, which don't have that color of contamination, automatically becomes pure. So that's why bhakti is so powerful. You kind of you start engaging in the higher, and therefore anything which is not of that higher taste is not appealing, is distasteful. You give it up. Someone who engages in pure form of anything, whether it's cooking or whether it is any form of professional work that one engages in, quality work that one engages, anything which is doesn't come up to the quality standard, they reject it. Right? For example, you must have all read about the football matches happening in Qatar. It was said that the Japanese engaged in cleaning up the stadium because they're used to that kind of thing. They're used to kind of engaging in activities which they do for others as much as they do for themselves. So similarly, bhakti is something that not only gives you the awareness of yourself, but it also kind of engages you in actions that are needed, or that are kind of something that you will automatically engage in for the good of others as well. There is one verse that will come in the later chapters. It says, Vidya Vinaya Sampanne Brahmane Gavi Hastini Shuni Chaiva Shvapakecha Samadarshina Pandita. One who knows who he is or what he is automatically sees the super soul in every living entity, in every living form around us. So that is the power of bhakti, because it gives you the knowledge of yourself and also gives you that ability to harmonize that knowledge with everything around you. In fact, I think you must have read right now, India has taken up the presidency of the G20, and there was a long post of the long, written script of what Prime Minister Modi has said about this of this position. And there was a comparison of how everything is the Panchabhutas, the earth and every living entity consists of these 5 gross material, and therefore how we must engage with our natural resources so that we are not depleting or not contaminating the natural resources, that it becomes detrimental for life and that it becomes detrimental for progress. So I was so happy to read it. At least, we are kind of, relying on our scriptures for making that advancement, making that progress. So it's really nice to see the world accepting and acknowledging the knowledge of our scriptures, because that is the only thing that will help us to kind of really move forward, or that will really help us to kind of, sustain, life on this beautiful planet that the Lord has given us. So the Lord advised Arjuna to regulate the senses from the very beginning so that he could curb the greatest sinful enemy, which is lust. Therefore, and why is he saying that? Because this destroys the urge for, the lust destroys the urge for self-realization. Wherever there is excessive desire, it doesn't help us to get into the platform of self-awareness. Yeah. Okay. So now the Lord in 4.2, he says, text 4.2, he says, the working senses are superior. Sorry. I don't know why sometimes my computer gives me a lot of problems. Okay. So he said the working senses are superior to the dull matter. Everything around us is dull matter, sentient and insentient. So anything which doesn't have the consciousness is dull matter, right? So the working senses are superior to the dull matter, because the working senses can see. Okay, they see and they say they kind of create an urge for something. So the working senses are better than the dull matter. The mind is higher than the senses. The intelligence is still higher than the mind, and the soul is even higher than the intelligence. Why? Because it belongs to the Supreme Paramatma, right? So the senses are different outlets for the activities of lust reserved within the body. Therefore, the senses are superior to the body as a whole, quietened in Krishna consciousness. Once we kind of, completely engage in the devotional service, once we understand that it's Krishna, who is everything, we automatically subdue our senses. In Krishna consciousness, the soul makes a direct connection with the Supreme Personality of Godhead, which is what it's supposed to do. Bodily action is functioning of the senses. Bodily inaction is stopping the senses. So action is very important. Inaction is actually kind of, stopping the senses. You must stop the senses for certain things, just like the tortoise example that we saw in the Sthita Prajna explanation that the Lord gave in the previous chapter. But since the mind is active, that even though the body may be silent and at rest, the mind will act as it does during dreaming. Even in the dream stage, the mind is very active. The mind just travels to any place that it wants. Physically, we may find it difficult to travel to all those places. The mind thinks of England and it's in England. It thinks of France, it is, is looking at the Eiffel Tower in its dream. The mind is ever active. But above the mind is the determination of the intelligence. So the only way we can kind of control the mind and therefore have control over the, the tentacles of, the senses, which are like an octopus, always looking and seeking for things around. The only way that the mind and the senses can be controlled is through the strengthening of the intellect. That's why the Bhagavad Gita always talks about how one needs to kind of, be determined. And the determination comes only through the effective functioning of the intellect, not through the mind or the senses. The intellect, therefore, needs to be very well guarded and taken care of, because once that is done, automatically your soul is going to be happy, right? So let's jump to 4.3. Hare Krishna. I want to end the chapter today. So he says, thus knowing oneself to be transcendental to the material senses, mind and intelligence, O mighty armed Arjuna, one should steady the mind by deliberate spiritual intelligence and thus by spiritual strength conquer this insatiable enemy known as lust. We'll read this last purport. Hare Krishna. Let's read this last purport. Yeah. Can someone read this last purport? It summarizes chapter 3. Okay.
Yeah. I will read it. The third chapter of the Bhagavad Gita is conclusively directive to Krishna consciousness by knowing oneself as the eternal servitor of the Supreme Personality of Godhead without considering impersonal voidness the ultimate end. In the material existence of life, one is certainly influenced by propensities for lust and desire for dominating the resources of material nature. Desire for overloading and for sense gratification is the greatest enemy of the conditioned soul. But by the strength of Krishna consciousness, one can control the material senses, the mind and the intelligence. One may not give up work and prescribed duties all of a sudden, but by gradually developing Krishna consciousness, one can be situated in a transcendental position without being influenced by the material senses in the mind, by steady intelligence directed towards one's pure identity. This is the sum total of this chapter. In the immature stage of material existence, philosophical speculations and artificial attempts to control the senses by the so-called practice of yoga postures can never help a man towards spiritual life. He must be trained in Krishna consciousness by higher intelligence. Thus ends the Bhakti Vedanta purports to the third chapter of the Srimad Bhagavad Gita in the matter of karma yoga or discharge of one's prescribed duty in Krishna consciousness.
Hare Krishna. Thank you, Mataji.
One more question here, quick question. See, everybody can't get into Krishna consciousness in the first instance, and meditation is a lot of hard work. Can chanting at some level prepare you for the deeper meditation, Mataji?
Yeah. So there is a chapter, chapter 6 also talks about Dhyana Yoga. So if you can wait until then, it'll be nice. But however, we have a lot of our, devotee friends who are here in this group. Does anyone want to talk about, many of you, I think, are at least doing 1 round, and Vinod Nair Prabhuji is doing 16 rounds. Can somebody share their experience of this chanting and how it has brought about a difference in your life? Hare Krishna. Any of the participants here?
Hare Krishna Mataji.
Yes, Prabhuji.
Yeah. So I started attending the courses around the time when Corona started, and started off with doing 1 round with great difficulty. But as I started progressing, from 1 round to 2nd round and 3rd, 5th round and all, things started changing around me, because we have been always meat and I mean, everyone in the family used to have non-veg and all. So I stopped. Then I could see over a period of time, all my family members stopped, and there was no force, nothing. It happened. So I consider it as God's blessing that such a thing happened only because of the chanting. And it continued, and I ensured that I complete the daily rounds, whatever time it may be, because I have got 2 children. So not necessarily that morning I am able to do the rounds, but before the end of the day, I finish my 16 rounds. And that discipline helped me to actually progress. I think that is the only way. Chanting is the only way to progress. What I understand.
Prabhuji, did you see any difference, or any of the people around you, do they see any difference in your behavior or in the way you kind of, take to things and, you engage in activities? Are there any changes that you or the people around you have noticed in you in terms of your pattern of behavior?
Yes, Mataji. What happens is, what I have experienced is, earlier my response used to be, anxiety levels have come down drastically. So any situation comes up, I see the problem in front of me, I'm in a position to take a pause and then take a call that, this should not affect me. Okay. And I'm able to take a better decision on any problem that comes up. So I think this is, the entire credit goes to chanting that way.
Okay. Thank you, Prabhuji, for that for sharing your experience, because that is what even I have felt in my life as well. Anyone else wants to share their experience from the time they started chanting the Maha Mantra? Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna Mataji. For me also, I've started, I'm actually a devotee of Krishna from childhood. So, I came to know more about Krishna consciousness because during the time of COVID, in the ladies group, we have it in our apartment. So somebody has put it for kids, some program they were conducting. So I sent a message to them asking that whether I can join for. So they said that there are programs for adults. So that is the way in which I got connected with this program. And then initially I could do it once, because I used to chant something else before. Whenever I'm in trouble, or whenever I feel that, yes, I require my Lord's help. But now what has happened is that I started, because through many of the classes which I've attended, they've started telling me that, see, you have to chant as much as possible. Since I'm working, sometimes I find it difficult to chant with the beats, but most of the time during driving, or whenever I'm sitting idle, or I'm going for a walk, or whatever it is, I try my level best to chant. So I can't say that how many times I'm doing it, so that is quite difficult for me. But even with the beats also, during the time when I light the lamp, and that is a time I use the beats, but that is very less, I should say. But otherwise, most of the time, whenever and the result is that it's not, I don't want to say it as a result. It makes me calm. And whenever people start talking something bad about somebody, or You see, I'm able to understand that, see, why they're talking like that. And I try to, it's not like the same kind of a behavior it was with me before. There's a lot of changes in me and the way in which I'm seeing the other things which is happening around me. And I feel that people are also looking at me. That is what my feeling. I'm not 100% sure about it. They are also trying to change themselves.
Wow.
So it's all because of the Lord. And whenever I'm in trouble, I feel that there is some kind of a help, because when I'm almost, because the help which I'm getting is not sudden, but when the things goes to that extreme, I find that some kind of a help coming from some point, that point which I never expected from that the help will come. So that kind of a help I'm getting it. So I feel that it is all because of the Lord. So I feel like growing in the sense, the spiritual growth is what I'm looking for now. But I don't know how I'll get, because the time and all those things are really putting me, into a lot of trouble. But I feel that for that also Lord will help me, is what my feeling is. Hare Krishna.
Hari bol, Hari bol. It's all evolution. So Bindu Mataji, you will feel yourself evolving. There is so much of maturity that will come in. You will not engage yourself in anything which is petty. The same kind of petty things, probably, for example, anything like gossip or engaging and, finding fault finding, and, you will become more generous. There's so much of things that will come into you that it will surprise you. It will surprise you. And you will not even know that, it's only when we kind of ask or, discuss these kind of experiences in groups like this, we kind of, we start thinking and talking about it. But otherwise, it just becomes so much a part of you that you don't even realize the transformation that has come about in you. Yeah.
Got it, Mataji. Thank you.
Anyone else wants to share their experience?
Hare Krishna, Mataji.
Yes, Rajpriya Mataji.
Mataji, in general, I used to chant the Mahamantra twice a day, and sometimes it gets even more in case of exams and when I get for participation purpose. Mataji, the changes I have encountered is that I became a good listener, let's say a better listener, and from level 2, I started chanting mantra on regular basis. Previously, in level 1, I followed the method you told to us, the strike method. Remember, Mataji?
Yeah.
And the words which I used to speak is carrying more value, and people started listening to us, not only juniors, but also the professors and even the senior faculty members, and they are paying attention to my matter. So I believe this is a growing process, and definitely I will do everything to the best of my ability.
Very nice. It strengthens you, because it also kind of gives you your confidence, right? So when you're confident, everybody looks up, right? You're heard.
Absolutely, Mataji.
So Bindu Mataji, I think you should try. Bindu Mataji is she's attending our program. I think she just started it since yesterday. So Bindu Mataji, please try, and then and please whenever you're ready, do share your experience of how you feel. And typically you will start feeling or you will start sensing the difference in a very few weeks' time. It doesn't take
Okay, Mataji.
Right.
Thank you so much.
It makes you stronger.
Thanks to everybody else also for your generosity in sharing your personal stories. Thank you so much.
So thank you, everybody. So we complete the chapter on Karma Yoga. It started with Arjuna's confusion. He says whether it's renunciation or action. So the Lord then talks about, he says, no, as a living entity, each one of us have a certain duty, a certain responsibility based on our nature. And he says nobody can avoid it. But he says the moment you kind of, offer or, give up the sense of doership or ownership, nishkama karma, once you become a nishkama, when you get that habit, you get habituated to nishkama karma, performing nishkama, doing things in a, with the attitude of nishkama karma, he says you become less burdened. And then he also talks about how the rituals are required as in the Vedas, for people to kind of get onto the platform of bhakti. But once you're on the platform of bhakti, the karma kanda does not have any effect at all. You become a karma yogi. You do the work because you have to do it. Everybody has to do the work. And the moment you kind of, give up the doership or the proprietorship of the work, he says, you automatically become a karma yogi. So each one should kind of strive to become a karma yogi, and we must progress from the karma kanda stage towards becoming a karma yogi. And he says, even once you have attained that, the transcendental stage, or once you've become self-realized, he says you still can't give up your duties. You have to engage in duties. Just as the way he gave 2 examples, he gives his own example. The Lord gives his own examples. And also he gives the examples of Janaka, Lord Janaka. He said, you have to continue doing what you have to do. There's no way you can get away from not doing things. And then he also speaks about what is it, the question that was asked by Arjuna. He says, why do people commit sins? He says, it's all because of desires. And desires are at all levels, at the level of the senses, at the mind, at the intellect. And the only way that the mind and senses can be controlled, because the intellect is far more superior to the mind and senses. So we have to strengthen the intellects. And once we kind of strengthen the intellect, automatically we are kind of curing the soul, or preventing the soul from all kinds of contaminations that are aplenty in the material world that we exist. So with that, this chapter ends. Hare Krishna. So those of you who want to kind of convert this to Bhakti Shastri can stay back, and then I'll discuss with you as to how you can continue or progress.
Hare Krishna Mataji.
Yeah.
Yeah, Hare Krishna Mataji, Dandavat.
Hare Krishna, Dandavat Pranam Mataji.
Mataji, we have Bhakti Circles group, that Bhakti Vriksha groups. From this wing we are started. So I just put the message of Bhakti Vriksha group, and also I shared that we have 2 groups, the timings, the days we had put in the group. So I request each and every devotee that they must confirm the convenient time, and they can direct message me, so I can put them in a particular group.
Mataji, are you an admin in the group, in the AL2 group?
Yes, Mataji.
Can you post it and repost it in the group so that our members can see it, and then they can revert to you?
Yes.
Yeah. So please.
Yes, Mataji, I'll put it again.
Yeah. Okay. And then, so how many of you want to, make this or convert this into a Bhakti Shastri, so that you don't see, there are 3 modules that we complete as Bhakti in Bhagavad Gita. And then once you finish this and you do the coursework required for Bhakti Shastri, you can straight away join, the Nectar of Devotion and Ishopanishad and Nectar of Instruction thereafter. Okay, I'll just stop the live stream and then walk you through the Bhakti Shastri. So Vancha Kalpatarubhyascha Kripa Sindhyo Patita Nam Pavnebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namo.